Hello and welcome back to Mirror's Signal podcast, your weekly podcast sponsored by Knowledgeably Instructor Training, award-winning CPD providers. Stay tuned to the episode for your discount code from them. Today, we are joined by Keiran Williams, who is the ADI project manager for Driving Mobility. And today's episode was talking about their research project, where we had Jackie on around 6 months ago, talking about the survey and needing ADIs and PDIs to fill that in and give the feedback about the driving tuition that's given and for adapted vehicles, learners with additional needs, and how we find that as an industry, as a driving instructor, how we get involved, how the learners find us. Loads of information from the survey. It's now been completed. They've got the result, and that's available in the description of the episode. And Keiran came on to have a chat about that, give us some of the findings, some of the things that they're looking at going forward. But more importantly, based on the findings that have come out of the research, they're now looking for feedback from ADIs, PDIs as to how we could move forward, some suggestions from us that might help them, and just some more insights so that everything can be brought together and make learning more accessible for learners that need it. So an interesting episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Keiran, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you very much for hosting me.
That's no problem at all. Thank you very much for coming on and agreeing to have a chat with me. And we're going to be discussing some results from the outcome of the survey from Motability. Before we get on to that, can I hear just a little bit about you and how you've then got involved with the project? And we'll take it from there, really.
Yeah, so I'm an ADI, been an ADI for about 9.5 years. Specialised more on the disability and neurodiversity side, probably about 2-3 years into my ADI journey. Got a background in sports coaching and sports development. Couple of people spoke to me about working with some neurodiverse students. It's like, Keiran, can you help this person? It's like, yeah, how hard can it be? It turns out pretty difficult at times. Knew an instructor who had some adaptions in their vehicle, registered myself on the Disability Driving Instructors website, got some clients with physical disabilities, one of which was walk in the park, really easy, one of the easiest pupils I've ever taught. The other one was, again, how hard can it be? And it was a real challenge, but she's a pupil that I will always remember. And I still get the odd text message from her now, about 6 years on since she's passed, with, look at where I've driven to. And, I've never had that with any other sort of learners other than these with, who you've really worked with and got to know. And it's fantastic. And then in terms of the project, I got speaking to Jackie, who was on the podcast probably about 8 months ago now. It would probably
I think it will have been, yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was the survey hadn't quite finished,
No,
but it
it
was
was the
well
last push,
underway.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jackie, I was speaking to Jackie. She's one of my mentors at East Anglia Drivability, who's the driving mobility centre that I probably work most closely with. And she asked me the odd question just in passing conversation. And then suddenly it was like, can you help with this? And I've ended up now as the project manager, and very, very pleased to be saying that we've published and that now the real exciting stuff can start.
So that's the purpose of this episode, really, isn't it? To talk about what's come out from that. And I guess, yeah, I'd like to hear your opinion. I've had a read of the report. I found it quite interesting. I suspect some of it people kind of knew or half expected because of just the way the industry is a little bit, I think, around this with additional needs learners or disability, whatever it is,
Yeah.
adapted car. It's an interesting place. And I enjoyed reading it. We'll get a link in the description so anyone that's listening or watching the episode can find it and have a read through in their own time.
Thank you.
But as the project manager, then how have you found the results?
So, firstly, I want to thank you, Josh, for having Jackie on previously, and thank all of your listeners who did respond to that survey, because the survey engagement was fantastic. We had over 600 instructors and PDIs come to us and give us their thoughts. And we got some really, really detailed insight from them. Much more than yes, no, I've got this and move on. There's some really quite, chunky pieces of text there with lots of information. So, this is it's a research project. It's finding, taking that information that you've given us as ADIs and collating that information and finding the themes from it. And, I'm not going to hide it from you. It's not a groundbreaking piece of work. There's no, silver bullet that's come out of this, but I don't think anyone really expected that. What this is it's evidence. We could have had this conversation at any time and we'd probably still have the same conversation about what the problems are. They've been the problems when I started, they're still the problems now. But we've not had that piece of paper that says, this is what the problems are, and this is what could be done about those problems, and be able to take that to government or a funder. And that's what this report is. It's that evidence that now can be taken forward, and hopefully money can then be drawn into this sector to improve it for your listeners as ADIs and PDIs, and more importantly, our students. So yeah, Driving Mobility as an organisation, are absolutely committed to this. This isn't going to be a report that just sits on a desk gathering dust. It is going to be followed up. We are going to do a 6-month and a 12-month, short follow-up to say, this is what happened. This is the good stuff and this is the bad stuff. But actually, we can't do any of that until we start getting now more feedback. And this is, again, why we're on here, is to go, here's the report. We're going to talk about what it says. But, as an individual instructor, do you agree with what the report says? And actually, if you disagree, please tell us. We need to know that. Have we missed anything? Hopefully not. But again, if we have missed anything, we need to know that. We've got all these, 27 recommendations. And yeah, we've got some ideas on how some of those could be implemented. But actually, what this report and the surveys that we did previously proved is, the ADIs know what they need. And, you will be the answer to a lot of these questions on, so how do we do this? What do we do here? We're not sitting here going, we know the answers. And stakeholder engagement is going to be really important in that as well. People like the DVSA, Motability, the Motability Foundation, they all need to feed back into this as well. But, we need to know what you think and what you want. We've got the bit that says, this is the problem. We now need to start coming up with solutions. And finally, one of the big findings has actually been around language. And again, we want to look into what should a instructor who works with learners with diverse needs should be called, because it can't be that, because that's an absolute mess.
That's a very interesting dilemma that you've got. I guess you've got, as the project, people that work in this field, because I can only talk from personal experience, and I get a lot of recommendations, mainly around neurodiverse learners. There's a few reasons I expect that happens, but I put it in the odd Facebook post that I have experience with, but I have no formal qualifications. I'm not actively promoting myself as this neurodiverse instructor as
But you're
such.
trusted. You're trusted.
Well, that's it. But that would come from someone asking someone
Yep.
rather than there being, which I'm sure we'll come to, a central place for suitably qualified people,
Yep.
because I'm on the disability driving instructors website purely
Yep.
because I have experience with neurodiverse learners.
Yep.
I work with some great people as well, but I'm not on there as any kind of accredited or certified. I've just got experience with. But I guess, how do you advertise that without advertising it on a national scale so the learners have got a place to turn to?
So, it's a fairly big challenge. And actually, one of the questions is going to be, we need to ask those who we're trying to work with. So we're asking instructors right now, what do you think the industry itself should be called? Personally, I think the words disability or neurodiversity specialist probably needs to be in there somehow, because we've got to be able to be Googled. But we're going to take those ideas that hopefully we receive from ADIs working or even not working within this sector, because that's just as important. And we're going to start presenting those ideas to the users of this service and their representative bodies, so charities and organisations that represent whole ranges of disability and neurodiverse needs. And we're going to get their feedback. And I think that's the first thing: is what should be called. And then the big word here is recognised. There are some great organisations, disability driving instructors being one of them, and there are some great individuals doing some great training out there. But it's how we nationally recognise that. From a personal point of view, I think whatever's developed out of this needs to sit on the NASP. That's the body that the DIA, ADI, J&C, MSAGB sit on with the DVLA. That would give a voice to this sector that is just speaking for this sector. Making sure that the sector isn't trying to respond after an announcement, that they're hopefully more engaged with the initial announcements. Builds up that trust, being able to have DVSA as a logo on things means it's trusted, means more people are going to come to it, means that learners can look at it and go, oh, this is, we know that symbol, that's a government symbol, we know this is a known source. And this is a long-term piece of work and is going to require funding, but we've got the piece of paper to try and get the funding now.
I told you through this episode, my brain's going to be thinking, and absolutely it's there. And something that doesn't happen that I think would be very good, like you've mentioned about having representatives with NASP. And when you said before we hit record, being able to be involved rather than react after the fact, I'd not linked the two, and I'm glad you kind of explained it there for me and now the listeners. In that there are issues that happen, links between our industry and the DVSA, that directly affect people that fit into this category. So for the episode, we'll call it disability learners or neurodiverse learners, whatever. Sorry if that's not politically correct. But there are things that happen that directly affect people that fit into this category. But there's no voice on either side officially that can be there at the decision point, which is an interesting dilemma. And I think that's probably got to change soon, and hopefully that's what comes from this. But the DVSA have a register with boxes that can be ticked, like you um, do CPD a whole 8 hours a year,
Yep.
and there could be a box added that you provide specialist support, whatever that gets termed as, and linked in with the DVSA's official register.
Or it
So
could just be a link. So a link on their .gov page that says, come to this register if you need specialist support for physical disability or neurodiverse needs. It could be as simple as that, that they don't need, as a governmental organisation, to take extra responsibility. It would, could sit with them, and it would be interesting to see whether they want that responsibility. But it could sit with this representative body.
how do people offer these suggestions to you before we end up down much more of a rabbit
Yep.
hole? If there are people you've had people filling in the survey and giving good feedback, and we've got my dog getting involved in the episode, how do people get back to you guys to offer their suggestions or their thoughts?
So we're going to be running up a follow-up feedback survey. It could take 5 minutes, although looking at the way people responded to what again should have been a 5-10 minute survey on our previous work that filled in this report, it could take far longer than 5 minutes if you want it to. And if it does, fantastic for us. Hopefully you can supply the link to that in your show notes.
Yes.
So we're not going www. Whole load of words. So yeah, please feedback on that. That will give us, some qualitative data, but also a whole load of actual words that we can use. We're also going to be running 5 online feedback sessions, which again, hopefully you can promote. They start on Monday, the 24th of November, and will run to Saturday, the 6th of December. Most of them are evening sessions. We have one Friday afternoon session. If people want more of that, we'll provide more of it. But it's just a chance to come and speak to me to, again, have we got this right? Do you agree with our findings? And again, if you disagree, that's just as important, if not more important. Have we missed anything? How do we deliver some of these recommendations? And again, what should the sector be called? That's the stuff that we really, really, really need right now. And we need, your listeners to feed back to us to make real change.
What should the sector be called? That's good. I'm going to be pondering
Yeah.
that for way too long. And that
Well,
is such a unique challenge
please,
because
please fill in the survey and let us know. And you've got my email address. You can also email me that. I'd love to hear. I'd love to have it fed back in.
there we go. So if people weren't really going to fill in the survey, just get the survey filled in, even if it's just for some of the boxes and a name for them. Get amongst it. Get it filled in. But yeah, the findings were, when I was reading through, I think you mentioned it at the beginning. Most of it was people are aware, but you need the evidence,
Yeah,
and that provides.
it's nothing. There's no rocket science. It's nothing amazing. It's cost. It's high cost to enter the disability sector if you want to have adaptations in your vehicle. It's training, the lack of training, the difficulty in finding training, and the fact that training is not accredited. It's the complex legal bits and pieces that is more than what I needed to deal with back when I started as an ADI. Section 88, PDALs, weird bits of law that I was never trained about. It's that service distribution. There are some good pockets of amounts of instructors with adaptations in certain areas, and then there's certain areas where it's virtually nothing. It's that support infrastructure and that nationally recognized organization that sits over all of this. it's the public having the opportunity to find people and finding it hard, and that when they do find someone, they've got a year's waiting list. And then we come back to that language at the end of it. And that's what the 7 key findings are. And from that, there are 27 individual recommendations, some of which are probably relatively easy to do. Will take an amount of time to implement, but should be done whether there's a huge amount of funding coming into this or not. And there's some other things that are absolute stretch targets that are not going to be done in 12 months, 18 months, or maybe even 5 years. But again, this document is not going to sit on a shelf and it's going to be, this hasn't improved. And that's driving mobility's absolute commitment.
So I get this is my next question then. So driving mobility,
Yep.
are they a charity? Is it government funded? Where does this fit into almost the driving instructor industry and the DVSA?
That
What
is a
are the
really
links?
good
Where's it going
question.
to come from?
That's a really good question. So Driving Mobility are a charity and they are DFT funded or part funded. So Driving Mobility are the umbrella body which sit over the mobility centres that are spread over the country that support people with disabilities to get into driving if they're a learner, make sure they know what adaptations they may or may not need, so if they've got physical disability, or if someone becomes physically disabled due to illness or injury later in life and they've got a driving license, they're the organisation that you'd go to make sure that yes, you're safe to drive, or no, you're not safe to drive currently, but you could be safe to drive with these adaptations and this training. And if you go to any mobility centre and you speak to any of the ADIs or occupational therapists or the managers that work there, they will pretty quickly say one of their biggest problems is having ADIs to refer to. ADIs with adaptations, ADIs without adaptations, who they can work with, who they can recommend clients to. So they do all this brilliant work, produce a really comprehensive document that says what this person needs to be able to do to drive safely again. And then it falls down because there's not someone in their area who's got what that person needs or has got that skills or that the organisation has that link with to go, there's this instructor here that's, got a manual car that's maybe got some experience with stroke, and you would be perfect. They would be perfect to help you get back behind the wheel, get you safe again, come back and send the report and, back driving again. And that's where driving mobility have come from with this. It's, there's a problem. What's the solution? But it's also how they can be the conduit for this, because as a charity, they can get funding. And as a relatively large charity, not in number of people working for them at that top end, but in the money that DFT put through to them, and then that's then spread through to the various individual organizations, they've got the ability to handle large amounts of money and support things like this. And that's where they sit.
So the purpose of this is that last link then from the assessment to you've told a learner they need to go and get some training, someone who's maybe had a stroke. Oh, and that person then asks, well, who can I go to? We don't know. That's
where Driving Mobility have come at this from. That's where this report has then come from, is that, okay, when they started looking at how can we fund this, it's like, well, there is no evidence. So no one's going to fund it. And that's where this report came from, is, okay, so Driving Mobility went to the Motability Foundation and went, we want to do this. The Motability Foundation said, yes, we want you to do this, but we need to know what the evidence is and what the need is and what the barriers are, like any responsible funder would. And that's what we've now done. And, we're now in that feedback loop just to really work out actually what do we do. And that's going to involve, as I said earlier, speaking to the instructors, but also speaking to all the other major stakeholders and seeing what they think about the report. And I'm going to be really interested in hearing what all of these stakeholders, think, because every stakeholder has got recommendations in this, including driving mobility. And driving mobility have got some quick wins, and driving mobility have got some ones that are not going to be easy. As pretty much every organisation that's a stakeholder in this sector have got. And yeah, the next thing is, right, let's try and find, identify the next pots of money and, take a plan that's going to be developed over the next period of time and see whether we can bring some significant funding into this sector, which will deal with some, hopefully most of those 27 recommendations.
So what are some of the things that you would like to see based on these recommendations? I don't know whether you have to remain impartial or not, but let's see, what are some of the, I wouldn't say quick wins, but some of the earlier ideas that can make change now?
So the biggest one, single thing, is having a recognised representative organisation for the sector that has official responsibility. And that, there's I got 18 recommendations that essentially fall within that, and would be the responsibility of that organisation. I think that's the big one. Now, is that a quick, easy thing to do? Well, no, that's actually going to require some funding. But that's the one that's going to create the real long-term change. So some of the quick wins, and a driving mobility one. This isn't going to be done, next week, but working with the mobility centres to get those mobility centres to have a point of contact at each centre for an ADI to be able to come to, be that me as an ADI that's known to my local centre, or maybe you as an ADI who's not known by your local centre but has got a pupil that's got particular challenges and you want to get help. Instead of having to go through the switchboard and not having anyone and kind of going, oh, who do I speak to? And I don't know who I'm asking for. Going, well, there's a list of people, there's my local centre, and that's the local person I need to go to. Send them an email and they can respond to you and support you as an instructor. That's not going to cost any money. We've got to, as driving mobility, we're going to work with the mobility centres to identify who these people are going to be, make sure we know how that's going to be done. But that's a quick win that, is not going to cost any money and should, and in my view, must be done.
There's a lot of parts to this, aren't there?
Yeah, huge.
I don't think I quite understood the real purpose of the survey until this chat with
No.
yourself, more that it's getting the evidence together.
Yeah.
When you're filling in the survey, most of the time we assume a survey is going to go nowhere, because I think this is the first report that I've probably actually read through from a survey that I actually filled in, where I'm like, let's read it with interest to see what's come of it. And that's it now in black and white, that these are the issues that driving instructors are facing. And I almost see it from the other point of view, and I have done for a while. It's learners don't really have anywhere to turn. And that must be a challenge for a lot of learners in that how do you, and it comes back to that name thing
Mhm.
as a learner, how do you type in Google to find a driving instructor with adaptions that you need?
And yeah, I think you're right. And as driving instructors, do we know the terms that should be on our websites and that sort of thing to hit those correct targets? Um, and I'd argue the probably answer's no to that, and that's one of the things we'd like to provide going forwards. But um, the Disability Driving Instructors website is a great resource for instructors and learners. Um, and I can't speak for them, but that needs to be developed to the next level is what we believe. Um, and that's essentially what the evidence actually shows is that there needs to be a structure that again is recognized and supported by everyone um, to deliver exactly what you've just said. So a learner can type in disability driving lessons in and comes up with something um, that's actually going to support them. Be that information, how do I drive with one arm? And it goes to the correct place, not to some, YouTube video of some horrendous adaptation from America. And trust me, they exist. And sometimes that stuff comes up. Um, it needs to be correct advice, be it Motability or the instructor side. Um, and that's where we're going to have to get to. How we get there, again, that's where the fun bit is. That's where we are now. Is we've got the evidence here. We've got to get to here, and there's a bit in the middle where, as I say, we've got ideas as driving mobility. I've got ideas as a driving instructor within the sector, but you're almost certainly having some ideas now. Hopefully, your listeners are having some ideas. And, again, going back to that previous bit of research, the feedback that we got was stuff that some of which I'd not thought about because it's never affected me. But equally, the stakeholders, every stakeholder has got a recommendation, at least one that, probably multiple that affects them. What are those stakeholders going to come back with? What is DVSA going to come back with? What's DVLA going to come back with? What's the AA driving school going to come back with as the provider of driving lessons to Motability? What's the Motability Foundation going to come back with as the funder, but also as an organisation that works in the sector? We don't know, and that's the exciting bit now. Is what's going to happen?
Does the AA have a list of instructors that work in this field? If they're the ones that can get the funded lessons, how where does that fit in, and what's happening there?
Good question. So they have a list of their instructors, and they do have cars that are adapted, and they have people who've gone on training, and they've got people that they use within their own school and BSM that they would use quite regularly. They also have a list of instructors that are external providers. I'm an external provider. I'm on that list. I think one of the challenges is it's their list. And, there's, probably too many lists. You've got the disability driving instructors register. You've got AA and AA Motability have a list. Each of the mobility centres will have their own localized list. And I know that there's there's various neurodiverse associations that have lists of people that have either put their names on there or they've gathered from the community. And that's the problem. There isn't one list and it's not shareable. So, if I go on the AA list, I'm not ticking a box to say this can be shared with other organizations. Disability driving instructors have a list that's open and that other people can go into, but there's no integration of those lists. That in some ways probably isn't that difficult to do, but again, it's going to require a lot of coordination, which could be difficult. And who owns the list and who manages it, and who's got the responsibility for it and all of that.
And then you've also got individual driving instructors that have got, because I'm sure there's going to be many instructors that have just got adapted cars and they've just built their own niche market in their
Yep.
area. And they don't need to go on any websites or lists because they've got work. Now, I
Yeah,
can't imagine there's a huge amount, but there probably is a few that aren't on anyone's list.
quite possibly. Yeah. And again, actually, that's one of the things that we've come out of this is, although we've done all this work, we still don't have an actual figure of how many adapted vehicles are on the road in the UK with adaptations and dual controls teaching. And that's, one of the things that, again, needs to change. We need to be able to go, this is the number, and this is what we think the number should be. And, again, having a point that we could take to a funder to show, this is what's known as a key performance indicator to show the success or not of the funding that they have given. But at the moment, we've got a number of 100 to 125 cars, probably. So that would be our starting point. If we think there's 100 to 125 cars, we think it should end up as a number that, again, we need to agree what that number probably needs to be. And again, it's you can look at the mapping data that we've done, which shows the specialist or those who called themselves specialist instructors, because there's quite a lot of overlap between those two bits of mapping. Because there's lots of people who said they weren't specialist, that when you actually read what they're saying, they're doing some really quite interesting niche stuff. That map shows some areas that are quite well populated, and I'm going to use the word quite because there's definitely not enough, but there's also areas which are just blank, absolutely nothing. And that's what we need to change. Locally where I live in the Cambridgeshire area, but North Norfolk has got very, no one living in that area. We're talking, Cromer to sort of Kings Lynn, that very top. I don't know of anyone who's got a car, who lives there, who's got adaptations fitted in this teaching.
And geographically, that's a place where a lot of people need to drive. I know that area from
Oh, yeah.
experience.
Yep.
I can't imagine public transport's got much better.
No. And, we're in an interesting period right now. For the first time in 5 years, I'm beginning to see people advertising for lessons. I've not seen that for 5 years since COVID finished, and they're just beginning to. And this market, this sector of our industry, you could build a really, really nice business for yourself that's got constant trickle through. Yes, it is a challenge, and there's loads and loads of stuff you need to know, and this report highlights that it's hard to find some of that information out, but the rewards are massive. The sense of achievement that I personally get when someone with whatever need they've got passes or gets permission to, get their independence back. That feeling is like nothing that I ever got when I was teaching 17-year-olds. 17-year-olds tick, learn to drive, done, move on. Rite of passage. Giving someone their independence back after, a car accident, after a fall, after a stroke, after some complicated medical episode, and seeing them going, I can just drive to Tesco's again. I can pick up my kids from school. That feeling's indescribable.
There's a reason to get
Yeah.
adapted vehicles and get down this line of work.
And again, it doesn't
And
need to be adapted vehicles. It really doesn't. If you're a manual instructor or just an automatic instructor, and you are interested in this, Driving Mobility would like to hear from you. Your local centre will almost certainly have people that they could recommend to you in the next couple of weeks. Just because you've got a disability doesn't mean you can't drive a manual vehicle. Just because you've had a stroke doesn't mean you should only be driving an automatic vehicle. You might be perfectly capable of driving a manual, but you need to relearn some of those skills or just touch them up where the stroke has done the damage and you've still got all the wherewithal to do it, but it's just, you've just got to get that last little bit to get there. It's essentially, it's what I did. I started off in a manual car, and that was where I started, was, doing some stroke work with someone who needed to get back behind the wheel of a manual.
that's why I've still got a manual car. I do a lot of work with neurodiverse
Yep.
learners, and a lot of those want to learn in a
Yeah.
manual, either because cars are their passion and that's
Yep.
what they want. They want a manual car,
Yep.
or just because they want to do what all of their friends have done.
Yep.
And there's no other reason than everyone else is doing manual. I want to do manual. And that's one of the reasons I've kept the manual car. I work quite closely with Dr. Julia Malkin,
Yep.
so I get a
Yep.
lot of insights from her. And there was a point where I was like, maybe I get an automatic car and get some adaptions. I'm not in a position to have two vehicles on the road.
Yep.
And this is probably one of the things that was out of the
Yep.
finding is it's not financially viable for me to have two cars.
No.
I tick the box that I'm not specialist, but I would
Yep.
say probably
Yep.
over 60% of my work is additional needs, if not more.
So I would argue you are a specialist. You may not be advertising as that, but you're clearly doing specialist tuition for a group of people that recognize that you've got particular skills that can support them. And you are providing those in a manual vehicle. And why should someone who's autistic or dyspraxic or got dyslexia not have that opportunity in a manual vehicle? But the next question is, how does that person find you and then knows you know what you're doing? And that's again, that's the next bit. How, and you are on the disability driving instructors register, and that's brilliant. So they have got a way of finding you. But again, they've got to then be referred to that register or find it on Google. And that's where the challenges are.
It's almost like there needs to be a brand that driving instructors are part of that they're happy to promote. So if we were to take disability driving instructors, for example, if there was a way that I could promote that just generally in my promotion
Yep.
for learners to go, because it is a great resource. I should probably do that. Why have I
Yeah. Yeah.
not
A
done that
sticker,
anyway?
a
But
sticker on your car, a something in your profile on your social media, something on your website. Um, yeah, but again, this is the stuff that we want the feedback on is how's that going to work for you? How, and again, it's then the messaging going back to those groups, um, and making sure the individuals who need it know about it. And that's where this is a big piece of work that, again, driving mobility on its own cannot do this. This is a big stakeholder bit of work, but it only works if the driving instructors ultimately want to support it and want to bring it forward. And I genuinely believe this report shows they do. I've sat in meetings over the years and spoken to stakeholders and heard the words, driving instructors aren't interested in working with tough pupils. They're not interested in disability. They're not interested in neurodiversity. Yeah, it's probably true. Some aren't, and some don't feel comfortable with it. Some don't want to do it, and it's not part of their business, and that's fine. But actually, this report says that instructors are interested, and yes, it is maybe a more niche bit that's fed back to us, but what it really says is they are interested, but they don't know how to. They don't know where to go for training for it, and they don't know what the quality of that training is. It costs a lot of money, and that then there's huge sort of legally bits behind it that can be quite complicated to understand, and there's no really simple straight line feedback that the whole industry takes and uses. And then there is the perceived risk of taking a student with a need to a driving test, and that pupil not getting the service they should do due to the perceived lack of training that a DVSA examiner may or may not have. And that's something that I was aware of that instructors were nervous about, but it came out a lot stronger than I ever expected it to, especially in our focus groups. And I can't answer the question of what training a DVSA examiner has. And that's, I think, where this perceived negativity has come from, is that we don't know as instructors. And with the standard check trigger points, instructors are certainly more nervous than I realized. And that's, again, a challenge. And we haven't got the DVSA response from this yet. They've, literally got it pretty much the same time you got it. So, that's something that Driving Mobility are really keen to work with the DVSA on. And then it's, again, communicating that. And again, that comes back to this national organisation that when changes happen, if changes happen, what's there is then able to be communicated really clearly.
It'd then build a team, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Instead of disability driving instructors, they do great work, and the amount of
Fantastic work.
knowledge that's there,
Absolutely fantastic work.
it's a handful of people, as far as I'm aware, and the ones that are doing almost the official work. If you want to know something about disability driving instructors, it's likely going to be a name that's given. If you see on one of the Facebook groups, I'm having an issue with this, or I've got someone who needs an adaptation, or I'm
It's
having a
going to be one or
license
two
code issue,
names that come back to you.
it's constantly a name.
And I think, we can use name. John Rogers is
Yeah,
a massive benefit to the industry.
yeah.
But he's one person, and on his own, and I can't speak for John, but I think he knows, as one person, he can't do it all on his own. But the work he's done over the years, where would we be without without John and the disability driving instructors right now. I'd imagine in a far, far, far worse situation. But it's developing that, recognizing that, um, and disability driving instructors and the Association of Disability Driving Instructors and John Rogers is an absolute, key stakeholder of this. Can I tell you what the involvement's going to be? No, because we don't know. There isn't yet a written plan of what this looks like. We don't have it. Because we need to get the feedback from, John, disability driving instructors, DVSA, DVLA, Motability, Motability Foundation, AA, all of the, DIA, AGI, JNC, all of these organisations, we need to get the feedback from. And then we can start writing down a plan when they go, yeah, we can do this, we can do that. But we don't think we can do this, but maybe they can. Or actually, this needs to be under the organisation, and actually, there's no one who can do that yet. And do we understand currently what the resource looks like that each of these organisations has? No. And that's where we need to go next. And again, that's where the instructor feedback really, really comes in key, because someone out there might have that idea that just goes, well, this is how we do this. This is how we, advertise to people with neurodiverse needs. This is how we advertise to, everyone. This is what we need to put on our cars, or this is what we need to put on our social media, and it's dead easy. Someone out there might have that idea, and I want to hear that.
Recognition. You said it earlier, didn't you? It's that when there is an association that sits with NASP that is specific for this field, that gives, I don't want to say that they've not got credibility, but it gives credibility to an association that sits with NASP, recognition, and then, it's that, how do driving instructors advertise, promote, target learners? How do learners find the driving instructors? But before we look to wrap up today, I think something that was quite interesting that you said was about when we was talking about learners teaching in, instructors teaching in manual cars.
Yep.
I think there can sometimes be that fear of the triggers.
Yep.
But also putting yourself out there to do the work and help those learners with additional needs. People aren't trained, and yes, it'd be nice to have training. But I think as well, as long as it's nothing complex, and where's that line? There probably isn't. But learners just want to learn. And if we're having a client-centered approach with our learners, generally we're going to get the information that we need from them as to how to help them.
Yep.
So just being patient with these learners is a good step, and then start exploring qualifications courses that hopefully, with the fallout of this, people will know where to turn to. There are courses out there. But this, I assume, the desired outcome. Go on.
And those courses that are there are of good quality. There's some really, really good organisations and people delivering those courses. It's just having that framework of, you start here, this is your next course, 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 this is where it could end up, or this is where it could end up. And this is the badge that says it's of high quality. Again, these courses exist. It's just, again, how those are recognised, and again, how the pupil recognises, and how you as an instructor should recognise them.
Maybe we need another official register from the DVSA as well. but there's a
or a,
minimum requirement to get on it.
well, that's another conversation.
It's fascinating. I'm looking forward to some of the feedback. I'm going to get the dates off you for the upcoming, I guess, the feedback sessions that you're going to be doing
Yeah, well, the
so
first
that I
one, as
can
I
get.
said, is on the 24th of November, which is a Monday. Um, we're running through to the 6th of December, which is a Saturday session. We've got a Tuesday, a Friday, and a Thursday session. Um, and if you can share them through your socials and through the show notes, and people can join us, I'd love to speak to them.
I will get that in the show notes because when this goes out on the 23rd, so when you're watching this, book out tomorrow night and find the link in the description and join that Zoom session.
Oh,
So there we go. We'll put that one in.
and we'll probably be able to, seriously, if you listen to this on Sunday and you email through to me on Sunday night, Monday morning, I will try and make sure there's a space for you. If not, we've got the other dates, and we're really, really, really keen to hear from you.
I love that. So before we go anywhere else, I
Yep.
would like to fly through some tell me questions with you, and then we can finish on any points that need to come up. But do you mind if we go through those questions first?
Yeah, go for it.
So before we get to the tell me questions, here is your discount code from our sponsors, Knowledgeably Instructor Training. You can use the discount code MSP10 for 10% off their client-centered learning Part 3 and Standards Check in-person award-winning workshop. That is MSP10 for 10% off. So the first question, can you tell me what car you would drive if it was the only car you could drive forever?
If you ask 17-year-old Keiran this question, it would have been a Ferrari F40. It would have been bright red, you know, down an Italian mountain road. Um, it's probably something a little bit more sedate now, you know, something like a BMW M5 Touring or something like that. So still got huge amounts of power and fun, but can actually fit my life in the back.
Love that. It changes it when it's forever, isn't it? It's not a dream
Yeah,
car. It's a let's go practical as well. I love the M5.
yeah. And who doesn't love the 5 car garage challenge?
There we go. Well, now it's just the one.
Just the one. So yeah, probably a BMW M5 Touring.
Nice. The next question, if you could deliver a driving lesson to anyone, who would it be?
That's such a hard question. Um, it probably wouldn't be an individual person, but it would be someone who's never thought they would be able to learn for whatever reason, and giving that person an opportunity, be it physical need or neurodiverse need, and seeing them learn and explore. And I've got one client that I'm working with at the moment who, seeing him learning, trying, driving a vehicle that if you sat in, well, it doesn't have a driving seat, but if you sat where the driving seat should be, you would look at the controls and go, this is a spaceship. You would have no idea how to drive it, no idea how to start driving it. And seeing someone like that explore their surroundings and try things, and thank God for dual controls. But you know, that's the sort of learner. And yes, it's a massive challenge, but I think you see by the smile on my face how much I enjoy. I'm just thinking about this individual now, and you know how much fun I've had with this guy, and you know that would be it's those sorts of people who you know have never had the opportunity, but with the right support can do it, and be that teaching styles or adaptations can do it.
Love that. What a great answer. So the next question. Can you tell me the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Um, say yes. Work out how you're going to do it later. Um, you know, I can think back to various opportunities I've had in my life where, you know, did I really know what I was doing when I said yes? But what's come out of that has been amazing. Um, that piece of advice came from a former chief executive that I wasn't working for him actually at that time. And he said, Keiran, can you do this? And I said, yes, going, ugh. And he went afterwards, you think you can do this, don't you? But you don't know. And it's like, yeah, I've got no idea. You've said something, it's like an opportunity, it's exciting, but I've got no idea what I'm actually doing right now. And he went, brilliant, give it a go. What's the worst that's going to happen? Um, and his name's Tony. Really, really important person in my life, back from years ago. And if I sat down with him now, I'd say thank you. Because I'm only here now today because of some of the things he taught me, 15, 20 years ago.
Nice. Love that answer as well. Knocking these out at the minute, it's great. So the next one, can you tell me your favorite book?
Um, the last one I read would generally be the answer, but let's try and give you Andre Agassi. I can't remember the book's name, but Andre Agassi is an American ex-tennis player. And it's it's his autobiography. I cannot remember the name of it, but it's an absolute brutal, and it is brutal, brutally honest look into a sports person's life, and probably the A to Z of how not to go about coaching someone. I think one of those first opening lines is "I hate tennis," was how the book pretty much starts. And this guy was one of the best players on the planet in the early 90s. Um, and it's not an easy read at times, um, but it shows the impact that coaches and potentially us as driving instructors could really have on someone. Fascinating read. I now need to find that book again, reread it.
It's going on my list. I was filming with someone a few weeks back, and I'm like, these books just keep adding up and adding up.
Yeah,
And I'm like, but I can't read them all. I
no,
don't have time to read, but that will end up on a list of mine somewhere. It's going to be like the list that we've been talking about today. There's
yeah.
many of them all over, all really important. But yeah, when I get reading, I don't know. I need to find time. That one's going on because I
Well, I
find books
promise
like
you,
that can be interesting.
make sure you've got like a plane journey because once you've picked it up, you're not going to be putting that one down in a hurry.
That's definitely going on the list. COVID was my time to read.
Yep.
I read a hell of a lot of books through COVID. I was quite fortunate. I wasn't
Yeah.
a driving instructor at the time. So yeah, I got through a few then. Now I do try, but yeah, so that one, maybe not right now, going on the list. I'll find the name of it and
Yep.
yeah, we'll get it on. Love that. So, next question. One message you give to someone who's considering becoming an ADI.
Um, Again, do it, but do your research. Um, you know the stats of people who start this and don't complete it. They're scary numbers. What, like 70% of people who start don't complete? Something like that, isn't it?
I
30%
think it's
pass rate?
probably bigger than that. The 30% pass rates for the part three, isn't it? The part
Yeah.
three is a 30% pass rate. I wouldn't know the exact stats, but it's got to be the amount of people that get a DBS and make it all the way to
Being
ADI
in the,
badge
yeah.
is going to be small.
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely do it, but make sure you know what you're getting into. Make sure you've got the support. sit in the back of a car. Sit in the back. Do you want to be doing this for the next 5, 10 years? Um, I reckon, most areas have their local driving instructor, so that person that's done it for a million years. I reckon if you picked the phone up to that person, you probably learned to drive with them, let's be honest, and you said, remember me, I learnt to drive with you. I'm interested in becoming a driving instructor. Can I sit in and see what it's actually like? They're not going to say no, are they? That would be my bit of advice. Sit in, ask someone who's done it for years, can I see what it's like? Do I want to do this? Do I want to try it? Um, for me, it's the best job I've ever done. I absolutely love it. There's days and there's times when it's like, oh God. But we all have that in whatever job. But I wake up most days going, I'm doing something different again today. I'm teaching, I'm meeting a different person, and I've got them for 2 hours, and hopefully I'm going to pass on some information, and it's brilliant. So again, say yes, but make sure you know what you're saying yes to.
I love that. Sitting, the amount of people that don't is crazy. And I did have a guy that sat in who was considering becoming a driving instructor. In fact, I've had two people sitting. I'm not sure whether it's my teaching or whatever, but they decided it's not for them, having been sat in a car for an hour and a half. They're like, you do this all day. I'm like, yeah. Nah, it's not for me.
We can go back to the report. One of the recommendations is a mentorship program. If someone contacted me and said, Keiran, I'm interested in adaptations. I'm interested in, you know, teaching someone, who's got a physical disability. I've got no idea what it looks like. I've got no idea. Can I come and have a look? I'm going to say, yeah, come and have a look at all my controls, and even better, jump in the back and see what it's all about. So, again, another thing that the report says, but it comes back to opportunities.
Love that. So, some great advice there. So, we've got another one where I need some more advice from you.
I'll go for it.
One piece of advice for a learner before they go for their driving test.
Um, I ask each of my learners 3 questions. Are you ready to drive on your own? Do you deserve your license? Would I, as your instructor, give it to you? And as long as they can say yes to all 3 of those questions, just show the examiner that. The examiner doesn't want to be impressed. The examiner just wants to see what you're going to do tomorrow. That's what I say to them. Just show the examiner what you've shown me to be able to answer those 3 questions. And you'd be surprised how often, someone's face is looking up, kind of going, oh, yeah, no, I am ready to drive on my own. Oh, yeah, no, yeah, I think I deserve, I do deserve my license. And sometimes they look at me and go, well, would you give me your license? And I'm going, well, would I be giving you the keys to my car if I didn't think you should be? And they go, oh, no, you wouldn't, would you? And then you have the discussion maybe about, you've been driving mum and dad all these weeks. And it's like, so you've already been driving on your own, because how are they supposed to stop you? And you get that little look across their face going, oh, I can really do this. And I've been known to ask that question repeatedly to students, and even on the day of their test when they're sitting nervously in that test centre car park. It's like, do you deserve your license? Are you ready to drive on your own? Would I give it to you? Yeah. We've already said this. So go on, just go and do it. Go and, you enjoy driving, go and show them that.
I love that. Building the confidence in the learners. A lot of time for it. So we've got the last question.
Go for it.
Can you tell me something you wish you were better at?
There's loads of things I wish I was better at. I'd love to be one of these people, and I'm never going to be. And biggest, I'd love to be someone that can draw. I can see things in my head, and then I draw it and it's a stick man. Um, you know, I can Mona Lisa's in my head, and I get a few squiggly lines on a piece of paper.
I like that. There's a coaching side of that, I reckon, where you put enough time in, you'd
Oh,
be able to do it, wouldn't you?
oh, the funny thing is, my students get a lot of my drawing, and it is line drawings with boxes with an L on it, and then multiple coloured lines coming off that. And if you looked at my notepad, and my notepad is probably my most valuable resource. And if you flicked through it, you'd go, "What the? How's someone supposed to work this out?" But it is literally all terrible line drawings with multiple different colours to try and show things. Green for trees, and the signs drawn in properly and things, because visual learners pick that information up. Um, but it's no artwork.
I have a similar notebook in my car that if you was to open it onto any page, it would not make any bit of sense to you. But I can almost guarantee that at the moment I was squiggling all these multiple lines, the student was either nodding
Yep,
away in agreement or drawing it themselves
Nels,
and annotating
absolutely.
themselves.
Yeah, if
Um,
it's a good drawing, it's been done by one of my students.
that's it. There is a questionable drawing. I need to dispose of it actually. But I left my trusted notebook in the garage one day. And I didn't realize what was on the back page until I had to flick from back to front to find a page that had opened. I get on with the garage. They're the mechanics, they're my locals. We have a laugh. So you can only imagine what they've drawn on the back page. But I keep forgetting to take it out until we discussed squiggly lines on paper. But there we go. Yeah, I like that. The skill of drawing. I'm happy with my age 7 stick figures in my notebook, but it would be cool to be able to actually draw a cool picture.
Yep, yep. You know, it would be lovely to be able to draw something that someone kind of goes, "Wow, look at that,"
No,
instead of
wow, you
"What is
teachers.
that?"
Yeah, I like that. There we go. We'll have to compare notebooks at some point, eh? Because I
They
don't
won't
know
be
who'd be
pretty.
winning. I'm no good. I do contemplate at times that this should be my social media, like going forward. I just take the odd picture of scribbles that I've drawn and been like, this is the level of education you're going to get from Josh.
Yeah,
But then I
don't do
thought
that,
better of
Josh.
it.
Yeah, don't do that.
Right, let's move on. So that was the last of the tell me questions.
Yep.
Before we wrap the episode, are there any final points that you'd like to go through this evening? Anything that we might have missed?
I think it's just the same message. Really, this is an evidentiary report. It's not got the answers, um, but it is part of the answer. What comes next and what people think about this is where this is going to go. Um, Change is going to take time. This is not going to be a 5 minute process. Where we're talking quick wins, we're talking 3 to 6 months. Long term, we're talking 5 years plus. But this isn't going to sit on a shelf collecting dust. But it needs, the feedback of our stakeholders, but it needs the feedback of our biggest stakeholder, which is the driving instructors. So please, 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 read some of the reports, even if it's not all of it. It's a big report and it's very wordy, and I've read it more times than I would like to admit, or more than I can probably remember as well. But um, if you just read the sort of introductory bits, kind of setting the picture, and then were to read the recommendations and the findings, you would get a good picture of what's going on, even if you don't have the picture of how it's all been gathered. So please read some of it, or all of it would be even better. But then we need the feedback. So please feedback to us via the online link or via our online sessions that we've got coming up well, this is going out on Sunday, so as of Monday. And I look forward to, I really mean this, I really look forward to hearing what people have to say, because you've got answers and you've got insight. And if this had just been a stakeholder piece of work, it would have been half the document it is. And that's come from those instructors that filled it in. So the biggest thing I say is thank you. Thank you to you to hosting us about 8 months ago, and thank you to you again for hosting it now, and thank you to your listeners for listening to me waffle on and listening to Jackie waffle on when she was on. And ultimately thank you for filling everything in, and thank you in advance.
Well, from me filling it in, I'm just looking forward to seeing what comes next from it. It'd be great to have you back on when you've got some more or some updates. It'd be really good to hear back from you. But I would like to say that for this evening, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you and helping me make sense of what that document is, because I read it, but I don't read an awful lot, and certainly not reports like that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about it instead of reading it now. And I look forward to hopefully coming back on your show in an amount of time and going, this is what is happening, this is how it's happening, this is the support we've got, this is how you, Josh, can get involved.
I look forward to it. And as long as we can do it in a manual car for now, we'll be on board.
Yep. I'm yeah. I think that's important. It should be a manual car. There should be that opportunity. So, good. That's a takeaway from tonight, isn't it?
There we go. You don't have to be an automatic driving instructor in an adapted car to get involved with what's going on here.
No,
It's
absolutely not.
inclusive for all.
Absolutely. Thank you,
There we
Josh.
go. Thank you, Keiran. Appreciate it. So thank you very much to Keiran for joining me this evening. And thank you to our sponsors, Knowledgeably Instructor Training. You can find all of their award-winning content at www.adikit.co.uk. So make sure you check them out. Thank you.